My name is Joe Hanks and I'm the Conservation Grazing Officer here at Essex Wildlife Trust. I started as the Conservation Grazing Officer in January, having come from Norfolk Wildlife Trust. In Norfolk, a key part of my role was livestock management. We used large numbers of Shetland and Black Welsh mountain sheep, British white cattle, Dartmoor ponies and Bagot goats to manage reserves across the Brecks. My work with livestock has taken me across the country. This includes shepherding large flocks of sheep in the fens and many sheep gathers on the mountains of the Isle of Mull. When shearing on a farm in the Peak District, one of the dogs had just had a litter. I quickly put my name down for a pup and 2 months later drove up to collect her. It's traditional to name sheepdogs after local landmarks or features, Beck, Tarn, Skye, etc. I soon named mine Pingo, which is a type of pre-glacial ice depression often found throughout the Brecks. She started working with sheep at 3 months and soon became an indispensable member of the team. A few years later, it was time to get Pingo an assistant, and we welcomed Jenga into our pack. Jenga came from a local farm and was a lot slower to mature. She didn't start undertaking regular work with sheep until she was about 12 months. It's truly fascinating watching how these dogs grow, learn and develop, and they certainly know an awful lot more about sheep than I ever will. At Essex Wildlife Trust, I'm based at Tollesbury Wick. Tollesbury Wick is a 240 hectare grazing marsh on the River Blackwater. It's crudely split in half, with about 50% of it being truly ancient grazing marsh that had never been cultivated, and the other half was being cultivated post-war. This has resulted in two very different fields across the reserve, with one half covered in old creeks and channels left over from its past as a tidal salt marsh. These creeks and channels are interspersed with a covering of very large anthills, which gives it an almost alien feel. The other half is much flatter and has almost a lawn appearance. Our two major conservation objectives at Tollesbury Wick are breeding waders and overwintering wildfowl. Currently, the reserve has numerous pairs of breeding lapwing and redshank throughout. The main management tool for meeting these objectives is grazing. So we use a mixture of sheep and cattle grazing, and this gives us the ability to create a real diverse mosaic of sward structures, from tightly grazed lawns to rough and ripped taller vegetation. So we currently have about 250 sheep on site. This is the original Essex Wildlife Trust flying flock. It's made up of a mix of Shetland, North Ronaldsay and large modern white crossbreeds. As well as them, we recently purchased 28 Black Welsh Mountain Shearing ewes, so these are 18 months old, and these lambed in March and April and have produced 33 very healthy lambs. So lambing is always a very busy time of year for me. If you've got 10 sheep or 100, they still need someone keeping an eye on them day and night. So this has meant long weeks, early starts, late finishes, and many late night feeding sessions to any lambs needing a helping hand. Our ewes lamb in the field on the marsh, and this causes as little stress as possible when lambing. So I just spend many hours walking through the field, looking for anything that will need a little helping hand. So once the lambs are a few days old, they're ready to join a nursery field. So they go in here, and this gives them time to bond with their mother, and they really settle into life in a flock. From mid-May onwards, when we get a few weeks of good warm weather, we start to look at shearing. Consistent warm weather is needed to get the lanol into lifting the fleece, and this makes the shears run a lot smoother over the skin, and it's a lot more comfortable for the sheep, and there's a lot less chance of any little cuts in the skin. Shearing has recently got a really bad name in the press, with videos of heartless and aggressive shearing gangs abusing the sheep. I'm quite determined to change this stereotype and show that it can be done carefully, calmly, and without causing any undue stress of the sheep. If we didn't shear the sheep, flies would inevitably lay eggs on the fleece. These eggs would hatch and the maggots eat the flesh of the sheep. Without prompt treatment, the sheep often die. Later in the summer, around early August, we will wean the lambs from the ewes. This allows the ewes plenty of time for rest and relaxation before the ram goes in with them in November and the annual cycle starts again. At Tollesbury, we have one of the largest pedigree herds of Shetland cattle. Shetland cattle are a very old breed of Scandinavian origin, probably bred by the Vikings from breeds they've gathered from South Asia. The breed developed into a crofter's cow, able to eat poor quality forage and survive harsh conditions of island life, whilst also producing both milk and meat. They didn't fit with modern intensive agricultural systems, so the breed almost became extinct. In 1981, there were only 75 registered cattle and 3 registered bulls. Thankfully, the conservation grazing movement happened and the breed found a new role. With help from the Rare Breed Survival Trust, there are currently around 850 registered individuals. I'm often getting requests from other wildlife conservation charities trying to purchase cattle from us because of their excellent grazing style and hardiness. Most recently from Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, looking at building a herd of up to 80 individuals. We currently have 53 Shetland cattle at Tollesbury. These include some very important bloodlines and genetics for the breed, so we are looking to find a suitable bull for our cows so that we can ensure the future of the Tollesbury herd and continue to ensure the success of the breed. During April and May, whilst the breeding birds are on eggs, we have to find a balance with the livestock. Too little and the sward becomes overgrown and rank, meaning it's not suitable for the birds to nest. Too many and the risk of nest trampling starts to become detrimental to the breeding success rate. The key to getting this right is to get the sward perfect in mid-March. I find this works best by mob grazing large numbers of animals, eating their way through the site over the winter and into early spring. At the end of March, we then split the animals up and spread them across the site to try and keep the sward suitable when the birds arrive and settle down to nest. I then move the animals around the site in their small groups, trying to cause as little disturbance as possible. Once the breeding birds are finished and hopefully fledged lots of young, we'll regroup the animals, initially focusing on areas we plan to control thistles. It's fair to say over the years, most wet grazing marsh has developed a thistle problem. Without controlling, the thistles will swamp the ground and leave it unsuitable for breeding waders. There are numerous theories about why we have a larger thistle burden. I personally think it's linked to the increase in air-based nitrogen and warmer, windier climates, encouraging spread and allowing an extended growing season. It would be brilliant to be able to look at organic thistle control one day, but at the moment we see it as an emergency measure to treat the issue with chemical. We use a mixture of applications, methods, and very selective chemicals. These range from boom spraying a few large flat fields, spot spraying by hand, and weed wiping, a giant chemical-soaked sponge on the back of a tractor. Once we start to make an impact on the thistles, we are planning to look at leaving small areas of the site fallow for a few years, then grazing them hard to see if this will reduce the thistle burden. We have many miles of stock fencing at Tollesbury. This creates a large task, renewing, repairing and replacing it as it fails. I'm currently working with Alan Brown to improve our fencing, ensure it's safe for livestock and staff, whilst allowing us to move them around the reserve, causing as little stress as possible. As I'm sure you know, there's plenty more happening at Tollesbury, but I hope that gives everyone a brief insight to the reserve and an introduction to our livestock.